The morning Jonas Hale vanished, the Whitlock farm seemed quieter than usual. Too quiet for a place where cattle, workers, and wind normally blended into a constant murmur. Dawn had barely broken, yet a pale mist clung to the fields like something unwilling to let go. The air tasted of iron-rich soil and distant rain, though no clouds marked the sky. It was the kind of morning that felt watchful, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Inside the main house, servants moved with an unspoken heaviness. Jonas's empty cot in the bunkhouse had been found before sunrise. His boots still stood neatly beside it, dusted from yesterday's work. No one said much. On the Whitlock property, loose words traveled faster than footsteps, and footsteps often led straight to Elias Whitlock. Elias descended the staircase with his usual controlled pace, the wooden steps barely creaking beneath his weight. His face was unreadable, not concern, not anger, not even curiosity. Just a stillness, the kind that made people lower their eyes. He was a man carved into silence, rigid as oak, his reputation forged in the brutal years following the war. His gaze swept across the parlor, registering each servant's bowed head. Only one person dared to look back, Martha Quinn, the young housemaid whose sharp instincts often betrayed her timid appearance. She had been the one to find the bunkhouse abandoned. She alone had noticed that Jonas's coat, the heavy brown one he never went anywhere without, was missing. Elias motioned her forward with a slight flick of his hand. "Repeat what you told me," he said, his voice low, measured. Martha recited the details carefully. She felt his eyes on her the whole time, weighing each word. When she finished, Elias simply nodded and dismissed her. There was no order to search, no expression of alarm, just the same steady calm that made Martha's stomach twist. By late morning, rumors had already brewed among the workers. Some insisted Jonas had run off, maybe for better wages, maybe chasing some distant dream. Others whispered about the strange argument he'd had with Elias 3 nights earlier, though no one could say what it had been about. And then there were a few older hands mostly who muttered about the Whitlock's history, how people tied to this land sometimes left without saying a word, or weren't given the chance to. The ledger changed everything. It was nearly noon when Martha found it out of place. She had entered Elias's study to dust, expecting the room to be in its usual state, immaculate, cold, arranged with mathematical precision. But there, on the large walnut desk, lay the Whitlock ledger, not tucked away in its drawer, not closed, but open. Its heavy spine had forced the book to rest at an odd angle, the vellum pages catching a streak of sunlight from the window. Martha froze. No servant was allowed near the ledger. Elias kept it locked away as if it were something sacred or dangerous. She stepped closer. Her hands trembled, though she didn't intend to touch the book. She only wanted to see what page had been left open. But before she reached it, something caught her eye. On the floor beside the desk lay a torn scrap of paper. Its edges were jagged as if ripped hastily. Martha crouched, glancing toward the door, and picked it up. The handwriting, sharp, slanted, was unmistakably Elias's. She could read only a fragment. The boy must not. The rest was missing. The ink looked fresh. Her breath hitched. She rose slowly, turning toward the ledger. From where she stood, she could see a faint outline where a page had once been but no longer was. An imprint of removal, a disruption in the book's carefully maintained order. Someone had torn out a page. Martha's pulse thrummed in her ears. She reached out, drawn to the ledger despite every instinct screaming not to. Just as her fingertips neared the edge of the open page, a sudden shadow fell across the doorway. Someone had come into the study. Someone who should not have been able to appear so silently. And though Martha turned, heart pounding, she could not yet tell whether the figure in the doorway had seen what she held in her hand. Elias Whitlock had a way of entering a room without disturbing the air, as though the house itself molded around him. When Martha turned and saw him framed in the doorway, the scrap of paper in her hand seemed to burn against her skin. She folded it quickly into her palm, lowering her eyes just as he stepped forward. His boots clicked softly across the floorboards. "You are ahead of schedule," he said, not unkindly but with a tone that made clear he had noticed everything. The open ledger, her proximity to it, the minute tremor she tried to still in her fingers. I thought to tidy earlier today, sir," Martha replied. Elias studied her face. For a moment she feared he might ask her to hand him whatever she held. But instead he closed the ledger with one slow, deliberate motion. The room seemed to exhale when the heavy covers met. "Jonas Hale," Elias said, brushing dust from the spine. "A restless boy, reckless. It would not surprise me if he has gone wandering where he shouldn't." There was no inquiry, no uncertainty, just a statement delivered with icy confidence. Martha murmured something agreeable and slipped out of the study as soon as he dismissed her. Only when she reached the hallway did she fully release her breath. The scrap remained clenched in her hand like a forbidden relic. She tucked it into her apron pocket, unsure why she didn't destroy it, but unable to imagine letting it go. Outside, afternoon light stretched across the fields. Workers moved in steady rhythm, stacking hay, mending fences, and glancing now and then toward the tree line where Jonas had last been seen. Though no one said it aloud, the air carried a sense of unfinished business, the unease that follows an unanswered knock. As Martha crossed the yard, she nearly collided with Samuel Whitlock, Elias's younger brother, though the two shared little resemblance. Samuel's demeanor held an openness Elias never permitted himself. His sleeves were rolled, his hands dirt-stained from helping the workers, something Elias had always considered beneath their status. Samuel steadied her. "You're jumpy today." "Forgive me, Mr. Samuel." "You've heard about Jonas?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice carried genuine concern. It softened Martha's nerves, if only slightly. "Yes, sir. Everyone has." Samuel exhaled. "He wasn't the type to run off without a word. He told me once he didn't trust the forests out there. Said the silence made him feel watched." Martha hesitated. "Do you believe something happened to him?" Samuel frowned, as if debating how much he dared say. "I believe people around here forget how quickly the past catches up with them. Jonas may have stepped into something older than he realized." His tone held weight, a quiet warning. Before Martha could ask what he meant, he spotted Elias leaving the house and ended the conversation with a polite nod. Samuel always grew cautious under his brother's gaze. That night, the Whitlock home seemed unusually alive despite its stillness. Floors creaked with the shifting of old wood. Wind threaded through the shutters with a whispering persistence. Martha could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the torn page, imagined what had been written on the missing sheet. She lit a small lantern and drew the scrap from her apron. The ink glistened faintly. The boy must not what? Must not speak? Must not leave? Must not know? The words gnawed at her. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, and she snuffed the lantern instantly. The shadow passing beneath her door was slow, deliberate. Elias pacing the house at this late hour. He often walked when burdened, but tonight his steps seemed different. Hollow, weighted. When dawn arrived, Martha descended to the kitchen and froze. The ledger, Elias's ledger, sat once more on the dining table. Open. No one would have dared touch it. She approached, heart pounding, and peered over the edge. The entries were precise columns of numbers, crop yields, purchases, and then a line that did not belong. A name, written freshly in darker ink, Jonas Hale. Beside it, a date, yesterday's. Her breath caught. The ink wasn't quite dry. As she stared, another realization chilled her. The torn page she had hidden. The tear mark here looked identical, like the ledger was missing more than history, missing intent. She reached out slowly, her fingertip hovering over Jonas's name. Then she noticed something faint beneath the entry, almost invisible unless the light hit just right. A second line, written in smaller, shakier script. Not in Elias's hand. Before she had time to lean closer, a cold draft swept through the room, as if someone had opened a door behind her, or as if someone had been standing there all along. The second line beneath Jonas Hale's name was barely more than a whisper of ink, shaky and thin, the script of someone who wrote under fear or haste. Martha lowered her head until the letters sharpened into focus. He didn't go willing. The words struck her chest like a blow. She stepped back from the ledger as if it had hissed at her. Who had written this? Jonas himself? Another servant? Someone warning her, or confessing? Before she could examine it further, the dining room door creaked. Martha snapped upright, swiftly closing the ledger, though she knew Elias would notice the slightest shift from its place. The hinges groaned wider, and Samuel Whitlock stepped inside. His eyes went instantly to the ledger. "You shouldn't be near that," he murmured. "I wasn't reading it," she lied too quickly. Samuel studied her expression, then the faint tremor in her hands. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. "What did you see?" Martha hesitated. Fear felt like a stone lodged in her throat. If she told Samuel, and he repeated anything to Elias, she might not fare better than Jonas. But Samuel's gaze held none of Elias's cold scrutiny. It carried something else. Concern, perhaps even guilt. She didn't risk revealing the torn scrap, but she opened her palm just enough to show the faint stain of fresh ink. "Someone added his name," she whispered. "After he vanished." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Let me see." "I can't," she replied. "If your brother—" "My brother," he cut in, "has built this place on secrets he calls order. But they are secrets all the same." The tension in his voice made her shiver. Before either could speak again, footsteps echoed from the front parlor. Samuel's eyes widened. "Go," he whispered. "Now." Martha slipped out just as Elias entered from the opposite door, his gaze brushing past her with chilling indifference. She didn't dare look back. The truth about Jonas Hale did not come easily to the workers. They spoke in pockets of whispers that dissolved whenever Samuel approached and hardened into silence whenever Elias appeared. Yet the name in the ledger had begun to spread like smoke. No one said they'd seen it, but somehow everyone knew. Jonas had not been a troublemaker, but neither had he been meek. He carried an intensity beneath his quiet nature, a restlessness that seemed to rise whenever Elias passed near him. Some said Elias favored the boy in ways that were not easily explained. Others claimed they had overheard arguments, sharp, urgent exchanges behind the barn or near the smokehouse at dusk. And then the fight 3 nights before, Jonas vanished. Old Mr. Comstock, a farmhand nearly deaf in one ear, swore he saw Elias gripping Jonas by the collar, pushing him against the side of the barn. Jonas's face had been flushed with anger, Elias's with something darker. But by the next morning, both men acted as though nothing had occurred. Comstock had kept the memory tucked away until now. Martha spent the afternoon in the laundry shed, hoping the repetitive work might steady her thoughts. But as she scrubbed the fabric against the washboard, her mind played again and again the phrase she had read. He didn't go willing. A gust of wind rattled the loose shutter above her. The scent of wet wood filled the air. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine Jonas's last steps, his boots left behind, his coat missing, his voice forever quiet. A shadow crossed the doorway. She turned sharply, but it was only Ruth, the cook, her face drawn and pale. "You found something in that ledger, didn't you?" Ruth asked. Her voice held more certainty than question. Martha froze. "I don't know what you mean." Ruth stepped inside, lowering her voice. "Child, the Whitlocks have kept books longer than any of us have been alive. Elias writes numbers for show, but the stories buried between them, those are written in a different ink." Martha swallowed. "What kind of stories?" Ruth's expression hardened. "The kind you don't repeat." For a moment, the only sound was the dripping of water from the wash basin. Then Ruth leaned closer. "You're not the first to see something in that book, and you're not the first to fear what it means." Martha's breath caught. "What happened to the others?" Ruth hesitated, then shook her head abruptly. "It's best you forget I said anything." She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. Her eyes flicked toward the direction of the main house. "Be careful," she whispered. "Sometimes the ledger doesn't just record things, sometimes it invites them." That evening, long after the workers retired to their quarters, Samuel entered the barn to check on a horse with a lame leg. The lantern light cast long, wavering shadows across the rafters. As he reached for a grooming brush, his boot struck something buried beneath the hay, something wooden. He crouched, sweeping the hay aside. A small box, hand-carved, with initials burned into the lid. J.H. Samuel's breath faltered. Jonas's box. But Elias had once claimed the boy owned nothing of value. He reached for the latch. But before his fingers touched it, a soft creak sounded above him. One footstep, deliberate, settling on the barn loft. Someone had been there long enough to hear everything. Samuel Whitlock did not move at first. The creak above him lingered in the air, followed by silence so complete it felt carved into the barn walls. The lantern flame trembled against the draft, throwing a nervous shimmer across the rafters. Whoever stood in the loft had chosen not to hide their weight. They wanted Samuel to know they were there. He straightened slowly, brushing hay from his hands, keeping his voice even. "Who's up there?" Nothing answered but the soft rustle of dry straw. Samuel took a step back, positioning himself where he could see the loft ladder without appearing afraid. His fingers brushed the box again, Jonas Hale's box. It was lighter than he expected, almost too light, as though whatever it once held had been removed. Or taken. "Jonas," he muttered under his breath, a thought not meant for belief but for the ache of it. A second creak sounded, this one softer, retreating. Whoever had been in the loft was leaving through the far hatch, the one that opened toward the east field. Samuel hurried up the ladder, but by the time his head cleared the edge, the loft was empty except for scattered hay and the faint imprint of a boot sole. He recognized the tread. Elias owned a pair like that. But Samuel forced the suspicion down. For now. Martha, meanwhile, could not rid herself of the feeling that the house had begun to shift. Quietly, subtly, like a creature waking from a long sleep. Doors that usually stuck now opened with ease. Floorboards that creaked under her steps remained silent under others. And the ledger seemed to move through the house like a ghost. She had seen it in the dining room at dawn, yet by dusk it had returned to Elias's study, closed, locked away. But the key was missing from its usual place. She found herself drawn to the study again that evening, the same way a moth circles the flame that will inevitably burn it. Lantern in hand, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of pipe smoke and old paper. Shadows pooled along the shelves, thick and unmoving. The desk stood immaculate, not a quill out of place. Martha's eyes scanned for the ledger drawer, still locked. She knew she should leave. But curiosity, sharpened by fear, had become a kind of compulsion. She reached for the drawer handle. A sound stopped her. A soft knock, but not at the door. It came from beneath the floor. Martha stumbled back, pressing a hand to her mouth. The knock came again. 3 faint taps in succession, rhythmic, deliberate. There was a cellar beneath the study, rarely entered, used mostly for storage. She had never known anyone to be down there at this hour. Gathering every scrap of courage she possessed, Martha lifted the rug beside the desk. Beneath it, the trapdoor lay flush with the floorboards, dust-lined and ancient. She knelt, placing her ear near the timber. Silence. Then, another knock. Not frantic at all. Measured, like someone requesting entry. She opened the trapdoor a few inches. Cold air drifted up, tinged with earth and something metallic. Her lantern's glow barely touched the steps descending into the narrow dark. "Is someone there?" she whispered. No reply, only the faint shuffle of movement below. She lowered the lantern. When the light brushed the cellar floor, she saw the outline of something wooden leaning against the far wall. A crate. No, smaller, more refined. A chest. Its lid was carved with initials. J.H. Her breath caught. Jonas Hale's belongings were appearing in the strangest corners of this estate, as though scattered deliberately, breadcrumbs leading somewhere she couldn't yet understand. She descended halfway down the ladder, lantern trembling in her grip. The cellar swallowed her light. The chest waited motionless in the far corner. "Martha." The voice behind her was so calm, so close, that she nearly dropped the lantern. She turned slowly, still crouched midway down the steps. Elias Whitlock stood above her, framed by the trapdoor, the lantern glow outlining the edges of his expression, composed, unreadable, and yet carrying something deeper beneath the surface, something almost tender in its restraint. I didn't expect you down here, he said quietly. Martha clutched the ladder. I heard something. I thought someone— You should have told me, Elias murmured. His tone was soft, but the softness made her shiver more than anger would have. He knelt at the edge of the trapdoor, reaching down with one hand. Come up, Martha, he said. This place is not safe for you. For a fleeting moment, she believed him. Then she noticed it. His sleeve dusted faintly with hay smelling of the barn loft. The same hay Samuel had seen disturbed. Her lantern wavered. Something in the cellar shifted behind her. Too slight to identify, but enough to remind her she was suspended between two dangers. One below, one above. And Elias's outstretched hand waited, patient and unblinking, as though he already knew which way she would choose. For a moment Martha remained suspended between the cellar's cold breath and Elias Whitlock's waiting hand. The lantern's glow quivered in her grasp, throwing fractured light across the steps. Elias's face hovered above her like a portrait caught mid-expression, firm, patient, unnervingly calm. He seemed less a man than a verdict waiting to be spoken. Martha, he repeated, a softness that did not reach his eyes. Come up. She did not move. Behind her, somewhere in the murk of the cellar, something shifted again. A scrape? A whisper? Or only her imagination conjuring shapes from shadows? She could not tell. But she knew one thing. Whatever waited below had been placed there. And whatever Elias offered above was not rescue. Her fingers loosened from the ladder. She did not ascend, nor did she descend. Instead, she held the lantern out toward the chest bearing Jonas Hale's initials. And the cellar answered. A breath, human, strained, shuddered from the darkness. Elias's composure cracked. Martha, step away from that. His tone was no longer soft. It was a command forged from iron and old authority, but she ignored it. She stepped off the ladder, landing on the packed earth floor, the lantern lighting a trembling circle around her feet. Who's down here? She whispered. Silence. Then, another breath, brittle, desperate. She approached the chest, her shadow stretching across the dirt like a tether. The lid was ajar only slightly, enough for her to see the splintered wood where someone had forced it open. She knelt, hands shaking as she lifted the lantern higher. Inside lay clothing, Jonas's work shirt torn at the collar, his pocket knife, a small sketch of the riverbank where he sometimes rested after labor. But beneath the folded fabric was something else. A ledger page. The missing page. She lifted it with trembling fingers. The ink, smudged by moisture, revealed lines written in two distinct hands, Elias's sharp and deliberate, and another, jagged, uneven. The boy must not leave. He knows. He knows. Another breath stirred behind her. Martha. Elias's voice descended into warning. Do not turn around. She didn't obey. Slowly, lantern raised, she pivoted toward the farthest corner of the cellar. There, half hidden behind broken crates, sat a figure slumped against the wall. His hair unkempt, his clothes muddied and torn, his body too still. Jonas Hale. Alive. Barely. His eyes opened at the light, unfocused yet pleading. His lips parted, but no sound escaped. His wrists bore faint marks of restraint, more rope than violence, but binding all the same. Martha's breath faltered. Jonas, she whispered. Elias descended the ladder with silent speed. Step away from him. Martha positioned herself between Elias and the boy. She wasn't sure why. Loyalty? Fear? Defiance? Maybe it was the ledger page trembling in her hand, the evidence of something Elias had tried to bury under numbers and order. He didn't run, Martha said. You kept him here. Elias's jaw clenched, but his voice remained maddeningly even. I protected him. From what? Elias's gaze flicked to Jonas, not with hatred, but with something dangerously close to sorrow. From himself, from this family, from truths that should never have surfaced. Jonas struggled to speak. A rasp finally broke from his throat. Martha, don't. But Elias stepped forward, and the cellar seemed to shrink around them. You don't understand what he found, Elias said. What he uncovered in my ledger, what he intended to reveal. This land, this name, everything would have burned. Martha's voice trembled. Then why keep him alive? Elias's answer was soft. Because I couldn't let him go. Not yet. Jonas coughed, forcing out a single word. Liar. The word struck Elias more deeply than Martha expected. His face tightened, not with anger, but with something far more fragile, something human. For a heartbeat, all three stood locked in a tableau of truth and consequence. Then Samuel's voice echoed down the trapdoor. Elias, what are you doing down there? Martha looked up sharply. Samuel's silhouette appeared above, lantern in hand. He saw Elias, then Martha, then Jonas, and everything changed. Martha, Samuel said urgently. Bring him up, now. Elias took a step toward his brother. Samuel, do not involve yourself. But Samuel did. He descended into the cellar with a determination Martha had never seen in him, placing himself between Elias and Jonas. You should have ended this years ago, Samuel said. But now there's no hiding it. Elias's stare hollowed. You would turn against your own blood? Samuel didn't flinch. Blood doesn't excuse what you've done. Martha clutched Jonas's arm, helping him rise. He staggered but stayed upright, leaning into her. Elias watched, something collapsing behind his eyes. Martha, Elias said one last time, voice breaking at its edges. You don't know what you're taking out of this cellar. She held Jonas tighter. Then the lantern in her hand flickered, once, twice, and dimmed. And in the shifting dark, something in the cellar moved again. Something none of them had noticed before. Something that had been waiting. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves dark American history. And tell us in the comments, what do you think was really waiting in that cellar?